We are day one of the Republican National Convention in Tampa Bay. Joe Varden for the Columbus Dispatch joins us. And Joe, I'll tell you, this weather situation has added a little chaotic feel to all of this.
I packed my boots, I packed my Gore-Tex expecting a hurricane, and we haven't gotten that, but we have gotten a lot of uncertainty as far as what's going to happen and when.
Yeah, it certainly disrupted day one, and Ohio plays such an important role here. And yet, the nominee from Michigan picks the guy from Wisconsin. They make the announcement in the state of Virginia. One could argue that Ohio isn't exactly getting the attention expected.
Right, it's like a week-long slap on the wrist for losing the state for Republicans in 08. But you look ahead to tomorrow night with John Boehner and John Kasich, our governor, both speaking. On Wednesday night, you have U.S. Senator Rob Portman speaking. So Ohio definitely still has a prominent role here.
Yeah, it will be well represented. And I'll tell you, this is Romney's chance to kind of introduce himself, which he has not, some would argue, done effectively up to this point.
Our brief gavel-in, gavel-out session today was capped with a video of Romney and the message, "We believe in America." That's supposed to be his message on Thursday night. It was a great way for him to kick off the week for the few people that were in the room to see it.
All right, Joe Varden, we'll continue to enjoy what you're writing here from the Republican National Convention. Covering campaign 2012, Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
Right now, Jim Heath is joining me. Jim and I are going to be covering the Republican National Convention this week. And Jim, they really have a fine line that they're walking between celebrating the nomination of their candidate and trying to be sensitive to what could happen with the storm.
Yeah, indeed. President George Bush actually writes about it in his book after he left the White House, saying that one of his true regrets was how he handled Hurricane Katrina, which is approaching the 7th anniversary now. He said if I could take that back, he certainly would. We all remember that infamous picture of him in the helicopter kind of flying over the scene. Republicans will do anything now to prevent that image that they're insensitive, particularly in the time of natural disaster. Had an opportunity to talk to Bob Schieffer, the moderator of Face the Nation, about this very topic. He says that it is likely this convention will shut down if the weather gets too much worse.
And this is a very difficult path for Republicans now. I mean, you know, if this storm barrels into New Orleans, and don't forget, this is the 7th anniversary. This week is the 7th anniversary of Katrina. If it barrels into New Orleans with great force, the people here can't be seen partying and dancing and, you know, having a big time.
And Tracy, if Bob Schieffer is talking about that, certainly that means that top Republican leaders are talking about that as well. We'll just have to continue to monitor it in the next 24 hours.
All right, thank you. For Jim Heath, I'm Tracy Townsend covering Campaign 2012 in Tampa, Florida.
It's a big night for Republicans. After a bruising primary battle, finally Mitt Romney will be officially the Republican nominee. Joe Varden from the Columbus Dispatch joins me now. And Joe, I mean, we had a meeting with Governor John Kasich earlier today, kind of an informal press conference. He's very relaxed. He will be one of the keynote speakers in a way tonight.
Right, big night for the Republicans, and not just for the Republicans, but for the entire country. Like you said, after all of the things that have happened leading up to this day, we get a chance to hear from this party tonight, tomorrow, Thursday night, where they want to take this country.
And Kasich's part of that.
That's right, exactly. He will feed in. He'll be in around the 8 o'clock hour. He knows that his work in Ohio will be propped up as a roadmap for how Romney could turn around the country.
Another quick note here, during the primetime hour right here on CBS, an interesting contrast. Ann Romney will try to portray her husband, try to humanize him in a way, something they had a very difficult time doing in the last few months, at least during the primary campaign. And then Chris Christie will probably take a knife right to the Obama economic agenda and make the point that the economy is not in good shape.
That's right. I think Chris Christie's really going to bring the house down tonight. I mean, blow the doors off Obama from 04-esque. I mean, people who don't know about him and don't know the way he speaks are going to be surprised with the way he delivers tonight's message.
Looking forward to it. All right, Joe Varden, thank you very much. Reporting from Tampa Bay in the Republican National Convention, Jim Heath, 10 TV News. Tell you what, Jerry, for about 2 minutes, the Ron Paul delegates on the floor of this convention took this convention hostage. They demanded that more of their delegates be seated. In the end, it was House Speaker John Boehner who gavelled them out of order. As I said, for about 2 minutes, they seemed to have control, but then Boehner took back control. I can tell you that Ron Paul tonight told reporters that he's undecided in this race. He might not support Romney at all. Ohio delegates met with Rick Santorum earlier today. Remember, Santorum almost defeated Mitt Romney in Super Tuesday. I asked Santorum a little later this afternoon whether or not he was enthusiastic about Mitt Romney, and he said he really liked Paul Ryan. I think that answer kind of reflects the wound, the deep wound that still exists. Mitt Romney will need those Christian evangelical voters back on board if he has any chance of carrying Ohio this November. Finally, want to mention that Chris Christie's speech tonight, well received by the Ohio delegation. They're ready for some red meat. They want to take the president on, particularly on the issue of the economy. They believe that that's an issue that they can win. The honorable mention for tonight is Governor John Kasich. What he didn't mention a few seconds ago with Tracy is that he delivered his speech without a teleprompter. In fact, at one point, the teleprompter on the floor was running backwards. It was a gutsy move in this era of these carefully choreographed conventions. Covering campaign 2012 in Tampa Bay, Jim Heath, 10 TV News. Here we are on the floor of the Republican National Convention, Day 3. Paul Ryan actually on the lectern right now, practicing his speech that he'll give tonight. Before we talk about that, Joe Varden from the Columbus Dispatch, let's actually go back to last night. Governor John Kasich, like a rock star here on the floor.
It began with the roll call delegate count. Governor Kasich comes up. All of a sudden, there's a thunderous roar in the crowd. Comes out later for his speech. Very well received. He was enthusiastic and really hit home some notes.
It'll be fascinating tonight because we have Senator Rob Portman who's on deck, who will speak tonight. And also, as we mentioned, Paul Ryan, what could have been in the case of Senator Portman. Many thought he was on that short list for VP versus the guy who actually got the job.
Yeah, this is an election about contrast, and here we have a contrast tonight about what might have been versus the future. He's standing right behind us now on sound check. Paul Ryan, big speech for him tonight, too.
Tell you what, Republicans have been really pushing to try to humanize Mitt Romney at this convention, to get that message out that he's one of them. How do you think it's working so far?
Well, I mean, there was a step in the right direction last night with Ann Romney, and she did what she was supposed to do. But they do have a long way to go. I mean, he had a tough summer with the ads against him by the Obama campaign, and still some work cut out for him. We'll see tomorrow night.
Yeah, Frank Luntz just walked by and told me that he had real concerns about the amount of money that's been spent from the Obama campaign in Ohio. We'll continue to cover it. Joe Varden, thank you very much. Covering campaign 2012 here in Tampa Bay, Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
My colleague Jim Heath is here with me. We've been covering the convention this week, and just a tremendous excitement tonight.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I thought he knocked it out of the park, Paul Ryan. And the intensity level, Tracy, I think we both noticed 100% more than it was last night. You know, I spoke to a lot of these Ohio delegates throughout the day. They said that Paul Ryan needed to really energize the conservative part of the Republican Party, that Tea Party base. A lot of the reaction tonight said that he accomplished that he did indeed accomplish that. As mentioned, Rob Portman also spoke here tonight. He was on that short list for vice president. I was on the floor during that speech, spoke to Ohio delegates immediately after. Got to be honest, many of them, including Kevin DeWine, the former chairman of the state Republican Party, a little disappointed that he's not the nominee. It would have made life a lot easier for Ohio Republicans to help carry the state in the fall. Nonetheless, they are incited by Paul Ryan. Also spoke to a Republican pollster earlier today who's been doing some polling in the Buckeye State. He says that Ohio is going to be very tough ground. Those anti-Romney ads that the Obama campaign's been running throughout the summer, they've apparently paid off. And internal polls now, Republicans show, have the Romney ticket about 6 points behind. But Tracy, in the final analysis, when Senator John McCain, the 2008 Republican nominee, spoke earlier tonight, there was sort of this murmuring in the crowd. They remember the fact that he lost the election to Barack Obama 4 years ago. They're ready to move on. They believe Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan can win this time around.
All right, and so, of course, tomorrow, the big night when Mitt Romney accepts the nomination, sure to be even more electric.
Yeah, you know what, and it's critical that he reintroduces himself, particularly to that key group, those undecided independents in places like Ohio that are going to determine the election. But I have a feeling there will be a lot of excitement. We have 120,000 red, white, and blue balloons above us. They'll be dropping this time tomorrow night.
All right, thank you, Jim. Kristen and Jerry, back to you in the studio.
And I know we can do this.
Paul Ryan had his big night at the Republican National Convention. Now the eyes of the world are on Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney's been very successful in everything he's done. Been very successful in business, very successful in government, very successful with the Olympics. I think he's a practical man.
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani says Romney must paint the picture tonight that he understands real Americans and stick to economic issues over social ones.
I wouldn't be so worried about ideology with Mitt Romney. I really wouldn't.
Experts who've covered acceptance speeches a long time agree that Romney's is particularly important.
And there is still a large segment of the populace out there that doesn't know enough about Mitt Romney to have an opinion on it.
CBS Face the Nation moderator Bob Schieffer says a lot of Romney's address will target undecided voters in swing states.
And I think if Mitt Romney wins, he has got to carry Ohio.
Republican strategist Ed Gillespie agrees.
I remember Richard Nixon said as far back as 1960, you have to plant the flag in Ohio and build out from there. So we see Ohio as a very critically important state.
For State Representative Jay Hottiger, a delegate and longtime supporter of Romney, there's one thing he says must come after Romney's speech.
I think what we need to come out of this is enthusiasm. We're hopeful that, America's going to really start tuning in. We've seen this in elections past where elections are close and then they start to really break.
Republicans hoping that break will begin tonight as Romney addresses the nation. Covering campaign 2012 in Tampa, Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
When somebody does not do the job, we've got to let them go.
Jim Heath is here with us. What did you think of Clint Eastwood here addressing the delegates?
I know, right? I've been around these conventions all of my life, it seems like, and I've never seen a moment quite like that. Certainly we'll have a lot of people talking. My guess is in red states it played pretty well. Independents will just think it's interesting that Clint Eastwood was there. But at the end of history, Tracy, what we'll get from tonight more than anything else is Mitt Romney, what he spoke about, his three main goals tonight. First, to talk about the economy and jobs. I thought he was extremely effective on that, pointing out unemployment in this country is very high, consumer confidence very low. He is a businessman. His second theme tonight, going after a critical women bloc, women voters. He went and discussed his mom running for the U.S. Senate. A lot of people know about his dad. Not so many people know about his mom. And the third and most critical thing, Tracy, is talking to independents, trying to warm up. We've spoken to the Romney children the past few days. They admit that their dad has some kind of warmth problem. Whether he accomplished that or not, I'm not sure. But Mitt Romney did exactly what he was supposed to do tonight. Whether that means he wins the election, I don't know that. But he did what he was supposed to do. He hit on all the themes he had planned to do.
So it would certainly give him that post-convention bounce that they really like to ride on as we head into November.
Yeah, he might, but we're so polarized right now. Whether those independents will begin to gravitate him now or after the presidential debates coming up in October, my hunch is they'll probably wait until October to make up their final decision.
All right. Jim Heath, Tracy Townsend covering Campaign 2012 in Tampa, Florida. It's on to Charlotte next week. Back to you. And again this week, Jim Heath is joining me as we cover the Democratic National Convention. And Jim, they were celebrating Labor Day today, but unions not so pleased with the state of North Carolina.
Yeah, they're not very happy at all. As a matter of fact, a lot of them are protesting the fact that we are in North Carolina, Tracy, which is a right-to-work state. One union, in fact, paid $1.5 million at the 2008 Democratic National Convention. This year, they're paying nothing at all. That goes to show you that labor is not very pleased at all. It's a vital part of the Democratic coalition, particularly in the swing state like Ohio, where Democrats must have organized labor in order to win the Buckeye State. This morning at a breakfast meeting of the Ohio delegates, speakers concentrated on the relationship between unions and President Obama. Former Ohio AFL-CIO President Joe Regala acknowledges that Democrats are having a tougher time this year, mainly due to the fact that Obama is no longer a challenger, but an incumbent.
It's inevitable that it will be a different election than it was 4 years ago, but that doesn't mean that Democrats or labor in general are less enthused or committed. Not at all.
Also spoke to former Ohio Governor Ted Strickland a little earlier today. He'll take the stage in prime time tomorrow night. Tracy, I can tell you that he says he's anxious to offer a rebuttal to Governor John Kasich, who spoke in Tampa a week ago. That lack of love loss, if you will, political love loss between Strickland and Kasich will be very much on display again this week.
All right, lots to cover. We'll have all of that tonight at 11. For now, Jim Heath, Tracy Townsend covering Campaign 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Jim Heath is here with us again this evening, and the former governor's speech tomorrow should be interesting in the backdrop of the current governor's speech last week at the RNC.
I'll tell you what, I mean, Strickland and Kasich really represent the political divide in our state. If we think back less than 2 years ago, they both got less than 50% of the statewide vote. Kasich ended up winning with about a 2% edge. But nonetheless, Kasich last week in Tampa made the point that he feels his economic policies are bringing Ohio back. But Ted Strickland says, hold on, tomorrow night he'll explain why the president deserves the credit.
Well, I thought he said things that absolutely were not true. Ohio was not 38th in job creation when he took over. Ohio was 6th in the nation and number 1 in the Midwest. I think that's pretty much established.
Yeah, you get the feeling that former Governor Strickland wants a rematch in 2 years. We'll continue to monitor that. Meantime, tomorrow morning with the Ohio delegation, Kathleen Sabalis will be discussing the Human Health and Services Department that she heads, along with actress Ashley Judd. Tracy, it should be an interesting day for the Ohio delegation tomorrow, and by tomorrow night, things should be rocking here.
They really should, and they've got sort of a big act to put out after the Republicans last week.
Right. I'll tell you what, their goal this week, one of the Ohio delegates actually handed this to me. It's a bumper sticker. I don't know if you can see it here, but Obama got Osama. I think that will be the message for the rest of this week. Try to get it off the economy, spread it around. If they can do that this week so that it's not all about the high unemployment rate and low consumer confidence, Democrats will have a successful convention.
All right. Jim Heath and Tracy Townsend covering Campaign 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina. Back to you.
It is a busy night here at the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte. Joe Hallett, I mean, Michelle Obama, first up tonight. She'll be trying to humanize her husband, right? Remind Americans of why they're so much more likable.
Yes, and it won't be a hard task for her because people already like Obama. They may not like his policies, but I think they like him personally. Her job is a lot different than Ann Romney's was because people didn't know anything about Mitt Romney, and I thought she did a good job of humanizing him.
Joyce Beatty, candidate for Congress, she'll be one of the stars tonight as well.
Yeah, Joyce is with a group of about 6 women, 4 incumbent congresswomen and 2 candidates, and they will talk about why women should vote for Obama, remind them that they are what they like to believe the party of women, and the Republicans are not.
Big moment, former Governor Ted Strickland, and he is expected by all indication to offer some red meat to this crowd of why he doesn't like Mitt Romney.
Well, that's exactly what he's done all through the campaign as a chief surrogate, particularly in Ohio, for Barack Obama. He's up to the task. I think he enjoys it. He'll get this crowd fired up, I think.
We'll look forward to seeing it, and of course the coverage right here from the Democratic National Convention. Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
My colleague Jim Heath is here with me, and Ted Strickland is going to really have to rebut what we heard last week at the Republican convention.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's actually a very, very critical moment, Tracy. If you think about it, John Kasich spoke at the Republican convention in Tampa last week about how his programs and how Republicans are responsible for the economic turnaround in the state of Ohio. With Ted Strickland tonight, it's up to him to kind of dismantle that argument. At the end of the day, these Democratic activists have to be convinced, Tracy, that indeed they can win this election. If there's anything we learned from Tampa last week, it is that Republicans believe that Mitt Romney can win. Democrats have to leave here convinced that Barack Obama cannot lose.
All right, Jim Heath and Tracy Townsend covering all of it for you here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Back to you. Jim Heath is with us here now, and the governor was fired up tonight. I said for a Methodist minister, he sounded like a Baptist minister.
I'll tell you what, he was given the green light to offer some red meat to these delegates. They've been waiting for it. And I'll say this, how popular was Ted Strickland's speech tonight, Tracy? At one point earlier tonight, he was the 3rd highest trending topic on Twitter. Wow. That's across the entire world. And I'm going to quote here a couple of these lines that the governor used. If Mitt was Santa Claus, he'd fire the reindeer and outsource the elves. That was one zinger. And they came back and said Barack Obama is betting on the American worker. Mitt Romney is betting on a Bermuda shell corporation. Indeed, I would say that this is probably Ted Strickland's best speech of his career, and it leads to some very interesting things as we look beyond this election, Tracy, toward 2014 in Ohio, which is, will there be a rematch between John Kasich, who arguably delivered one of his best speeches a week ago in Tampa, and Ted Strickland? One thing is certain here, putting all partisanship aside, Ohio was very well served by both of these men. John Kasich last week in Tampa, Ted Strickland tonight.
Right, that is something that both parties should be able to agree on.
Correct, right.
All right, Jim Heath and Tracy Townsend covering Campaign 2012, the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. Back to you.
Two critical decisions made at the Democratic National Convention today, Joe. And the first one, Bill Clinton, the keynote speaker. If anybody can relate to the white independent business person in Ohio, Bill Clinton is that man.
Well, you're right, Jim. His popularity cuts across all voter groups, but he especially can talk to business people. He speaks the language of business. He became a millionaire after he left the presidency. He balanced the budget. There was no federal deficit when he left. Bill Clinton is a guy who worked with John Kasich to balance the federal budget when Kasich was budget director. So, yeah, he gives Obama credibility with white business folks.
He had a 66% job approval rating when he left office. It's still the same today. Very popular political figure. Very quickly, another decision. President Obama will give his speech tomorrow night in this hall rather than outdoors.
Yeah, it was a good decision because it looks like there could be thunderstorms tomorrow night. And I talked to Jim Messina, the campaign manager, today, and he said the last thing we want is for anybody to get hurt. But Republicans, of course, are having a field day, saying they weren't going to be able to fill the stadium. Right. Messina said absolutely they were going to fill it.
All right, we'll continue to follow all of this from the Democratic National Convention here in Charlotte. Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
And of course, tonight, the big speaker is former President Bill Clinton. Jim Heath is here with me. And Jim, talk about why tonight's speech from Clinton is just as important, perhaps, as tomorrow's from President Obama.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Tracy, I honestly believe that Bill Clinton's address tonight could be the most important thing that happens to President Obama in the state of Ohio. Why? Because Bill Clinton can go after what we call the Bubba vote, white, male, business people who have been a little skeptical of President Obama's economic plan. Bill Clinton comes into this arena tonight with a 60 66% approval rating. He's wildly popular, and he can make the case that during his presidency, there was a budget surplus and there were good economic times. So Tracy, Clinton could play pivotal to that important undecided group. This comes on the same day. There are two new polls in the state of Ohio. Both of them, a Republican-leaning poll and a Democratic-leaning poll, both of them show this race is still dead even.
It's so much fun to cover, and of course tonight, covering Bill Clinton's speech will be fun for us.
Yeah.
For Jim Heath, I'm Tracy Townsend, covering campaign 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Democratic National Convention. Back to you.
I don't see how Romney wins this if he loses Ohio. The other part is, if he loses Florida, he's got to win every other battleground state. So it's going to be close. I think probably it comes down to Ohio.
10 TV's Jim Heath joins us live from Charlotte to talk about the big points the Democrats made tonight. Jim?
Yeah, good evening, Jerry. I would say that Clinton's perhaps the best line that he had during his speech tonight was that Obama's cool on the outside but burns for America on the inside. He tried to take that 66% approval rating that he has and handed off some of it to President Obama. Tried to set the economic record straight, pointing out the Democrats historically have had a better economy than Republicans. And he went right after those Ohio moderates and independents, saying that the president is committed to compromise the next 4 years, while Mitt Romney would not. I don't think we can underestimate how important this speech will play, particularly with those independents in the state of Ohio. Jerry, one other quick thing. Earlier today, Democrats added the word God back to their official party platform after former Ohio Governor Ted Strickland insisted that that happen. It took 3 voice votes here on the floor to get that approved, and it created a few awkward moments. Republicans have had a field day with that throughout the day, but my thought is that most voters will remember that the word God is back in the Democratic platform, not the process that it took to make that happen. Covering campaign 2012 at the Democratic National Convention, Jim Heath, 10 TV News. Final night of the Democratic National Convention here in Charlotte. And Joe, this is going to be such a pivotal moment for Barack Obama. But before we talk about that, let's go back to last night. There is still an energy in this hall about Bill Clinton's speech.
Clinton was dynamite. He raised the bar for Barack Obama. It'll be interesting tonight to see if Barack Obama can make as good a case for himself as Bill Clinton did last night.
Right. It's always fascinating, too, because we know the dynamics between Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, not that great.
No, obviously there was the Hillary factor from 2008 when she ran for president, but they really seemed, after the speech, to have a warm moment when they hugged, and it actually appeared genuine.
All right, so for tonight, this could be arguably the most important political speech of Barack Obama's career. He's got to make a real case, particularly to Ohio independents.
He does, and I think he needs to do that by projecting forward, by looking ahead at what he will offer America, the country, Ohio, in another term. He's got to be positive. He's got to talk about economic hope and security for the future, make people feel good about him like they did in 2008.
Should be something to watch. All right, we'll continue to cover it here from the Democratic National Convention. Jim Heath, 10 TV News.
Jim Heath is with me right now. And Jim, you say this is probably the most important speech of the president's career.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, he has to reconnect. And there is a political reality tonight, Tracy, that I think we have to put on the table before the president speaks. That is the fact that his approval ratings remains below 50%. Most Americans believe that the country's on the wrong track. We have stubbornly high unemployment and very low consumer confidence. The president knows that he has to follow Bill Clinton's lead tonight and address those critical independents, particularly in swing states like our own. But make no mistake about it, while Republicans believe that they can get some of those independents back between now and November, Democrat strategists are beginning to shift their strategy, their outlook for the fall. They say now their game will be to get out their vote. Labor, minorities, young people. Tracy, they believe that will be the coalition that will help the president, because in the final analysis, those independent votes probably will go to Mitt Romney, the challenger, rather than to go with the incumbent that they already know.
All right, so a lot to watch for this evening.
And Joe Biden, too.
And Joe Biden. A lot to do here this evening. Covering campaign 2012 for you, Jim Heath and Tracy Townsend in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Democratic National Convention. Jim Heath here with me. You and I listened to the speech. What did you think? Did he hit the points that were necessary?
Yeah, I thought it was a very, very effective speech, and I thought it was interesting how he surrounded himself with probably his 2 biggest allies in this fight, his wife, Michelle, along with former President Bill Clinton. Tracy, he went right after Mitt Romney on the economics, painting him as a champion of the rich and of Wall Street. Also took a shot at Mitt Romney's recent trip to London and the Olympics there, where there was some controversy. He also touched on his strengths during the last 4 years, ending the war in Iraq, killing bin Laden, saving the auto industry. But he failed to offer a lot of specifics on how to cut into the largest budget deficits we've ever seen, along with that high unemployment rate, historic highs in a presidential election year, and how to convince those Americans that we're actually on the right track, not the wrong track. I'm not sure he did that tonight. After all the conventioneering in the last 2 weeks, Tracy, I think the bottom line is this: reset the clock. We are back at square one. This is going to be a mad sprint to the finish line over the next 60 days.
Right, so next we have debates, but more close to Ohioans is campaigns in Ohio this weekend.
That's right. I think we're going to continue to see all four of these candidates, the presidential and vice presidential candidates, trip over each other all across the Buckeye State in the next 60 days.
All right, and of course we'll be covering it. For Jim Heath, I'm Tracy Townsend. We're covering Campaign 2012, the Democratic National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. Back to you.